Good morning, everybody, and we are lighting the candle, a world that works. I've forgotten how many episodes this is, but it's starting to be a few, no doubt about it. A lot of things happening in the world, and we just want to let you know that we get out of bed every single morning, we go through our routine, and when we remember, we're mindful about it. And the main thing that we're here to talk about and to generate is some peace and quiet in the world and an opportunity for you to find empowerment by being a participant in this conversation. We know actively you're going to be listening to this in the future, but I want you to know that energy is not temporal. It has nothing to do with right now versus next year versus last year. What if the conversation that we're having right now, you're an active participant in just because you're engaging in it at some point? That being said, where we are right now is we're casting a pebble in many ponds. The ponds in the past, the ponds in the present, the ponds in the future. And those of you that believe in the omniverse or the multiverse, or maybe a verse from Shakespeare's quatrain, whatever. The whole idea here is we're looking to empower each other in this. And that's kind of our gauge to determine whether or not we're providing an opportunity of value for you, our listeners. And ultimately, that's really what we're going for here. An opportunity to be quiet in a sea of noise that makes no sense and is designed to make no sense. How about you quiet your mind for a moment and you allow the sense to come to you and then generate your new sense coming from who you are and why you were placed here on this planet. It's a gift. We honor you for that gift, and we want to be the energy today that makes your gift worthwhile. That's a little intro that just kind of comes from the heart. I don't think I've ever said those words quite like that before, but I want to identify myself. I'm not just some random guy out there in pod world or podverse. I'm Bill Correll, and I have two dear friends here with me, co-hosts, as a matter of fact, two of the original anchors. I've got Lisa Sheehan, and she'll tell you a little bit more about herself. And I've also got my good buddy, Ken Caputo. There's been so much going on in the world. And something kind of just came to me this morning. And I'd like to see if we could, because we like to, I have the power to generate where the conversation goes in the beginning. Then after that, I try to grab the tail. But in the meantime, two words that come to me today are certainty and curiosity. So, Lisa, what do you think? Is that a good place for us to start playing in the sandbox today?
Yes, it's a very nice sandbox. I'm curious about it. But certainty. Well, I think we've dealt with curiosity before. Actually, I think we've dealt with both words almost before. I'm trying to think if certainty was actually specifically one of them. But lately, I've been dealing with like nothing is certain, except like the old adage, death and taxes. But and curiosity is how we should be almost all the time. So that's how I look at both of those words simply.
Good start. Anything else?
I'm complete.
All right. So we have a working definition from the good book of Lisa. And any thoughts coming to mind?
For me?
Yeah.
So curiosity is an interesting one. I have a newer friend who, very brilliant man, and he kind of voices a lot that curiosity is sort of at the heart of all things, like, finding peace in your life, or, maybe certainty. I'm not big on certainty. Certitude, I think, is a word that I prefer, which can be a little bit, have some impermanence to it, but it can serve you in the moment. But it's just interesting. He, this is someone who works with, he's an acupuncturist and, works kind of in people facing various challenges or whatever. And, he always has voiced that when he helps someone remember to be curious about whatever their circumstances are, that opens things up. Whereas, if they're in a judgment mode or a crisis mode or that kind of thing where they aren't open to be curious about the circumstances, whatever they are, it becomes they become locked into a box. They become rigid instead of flexible. So, and personally, that really resonated with me because that was one of the things that made it so easy in a way to tap into the energy of children, is just make space for their natural curiosity to bubble to the surface, and all kinds of interesting things would start to happen. So, so I think reminding ourselves, to stay curious or to be curious can be a very powerful thing.
Excellent. And I offer this kind of model for your approval. The reason that these two words came up for me today was it had to do with a conversation of how people are both comfortable and uncomfortable with certainty. And I started thinking about what's underneath certainty. When people are certain and they're sure and all the rest of this, it almost seems like it's indistinguishable from your belief or your belief system. And as a result of that, it's going to always give you two alternatives of what comes next in your life, no matter what that is. It'll either turn out, well, maybe three, turn out good, turn out bad, or indifferent, make no difference at all. And the interesting part of that is what is driving your certainty and your belief system is everything that's happened in your life up until now. Distinguished, remembered, unremembered, undistinguished, they're all in this kind of soup of what all about this minute, like what's coming next. And the interesting part of that is that if we could summarize and distill that all down, let's say that certainty is that thing that that sometimes has been right, but mostly is not necessarily right. Oftentimes, that belief that and you're certain of is the one that hurts you, and that's the one that's wrong. Okay. Oftentimes and most people, by the way, I have this from a really good authority. I did some research on it, and I went to the corner and I talked to Jose, and Jose told me that most people operate from the standpoint of what is coming next is not good for us. It's mostly going to be bad. So let's get ready for that. And so in terms of thinking about what you said, Ken, about children and how a childish openness to play and curiosity is little less colored, let's say, by having a very nice short life that doesn't have enough bad things in it for everything that could happen to always appear bad. I'm making my friend Jose right at the moment that, what if he is correct and most people seem to project that the next thing that's going to happen in their life isn't always going to be great. And so there's these strategies and techniques to replace a negative thought with a positive thought and all that. But what if we could just distinguish that all certainty is generated from a past, well-informed, poorly informed, made up, actually experienced, all that in a soup that you can't distinguish in a moment when you have to decide what to do next. And curiosity is this really cool, like unabashed dove that comes from the future. This dove is basically asking you a question. How do you like to try me on for size? What if you have no idea what's going to happen next? What kind of question would you come up with? And what kind of fun could you have coming up with that question if the question's coming from the future and not coming from the past? How do you like that platform?
It's a great leaping point. But I think curiosity can almost be applied to almost any, like, for instance, it being just Thanksgiving and, the terms grateful and gratitude being tossed around a lot and to put to good use and contemplated.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, and then somebody stretched it out to be the great fullness of life. And that I've been curious to look at the great fullness of life in each moment. Like if I'm stuck, I look at that moment and say, okay, wait a minute, I'm either enjoying a nice cup of coffee or, there's something that I can be grateful about in that moment. So, and it's kind of changed my perspective a little to be curious about each moment, and then to be curious about things that you just pass off as because it's so automatic. Even movement. I was doing a little qigong this morning, and because she was so good at explaining what to pay attention to in your body and stuff like that, that kind of we always talk about athleticism and that aspect of being in tune with your body, and or just saying to notice the movement when normally just to lower your arms is automatic. You don't even think about it. But if you feel into it and say, okay, now let's relax your shoulder, relax your neck, relax every part of you. And it's like something new I discovered just by being curious in that moment as to what I was doing. So, I mean, curiosity can be applied to every single second probably of your day. And I think that just helps expand and lets you be more basically grateful for each moment that you exist.
It's really cool. What I love in what you're saying, Lisa, is when we find a strategy that works, we name it. And what if curiosity is coming from a different place than having a formula? What if curiosity isn't something that you apply like a question that seems very similar in every circumstance? What if a fully expanded, fully developed, full muscled, let's say a 25-year 10th dan black belt in life, that at this point it's more or less bring it. I don't care what it is. Let's see what I'm made of, that kind of open curiosity. That's the mindset, I think, of a 2 or 3-year-old.
Right.
Right. So that kind of childlike behavior, which I really love when human beings take a moment of their life and decide to behave that way in an appropriate way, because you have to make an appropriate decision in circumstances, when you're a person who's 67, 68 years old, there's some things that I can do that would really not be a fantastic idea and could be coming from full on curiosity and having a very well-developed sense of that. And there would be some things that would make no sense along the way for me to be certain about either. So there's always this, I think today I'm creating this conversation about struggle and conflict between our certain mind and our curious mind. Like we have many different places that we can come from, many different ways to process the universe and our life and the next question. And then being mindful, as you were saying, Lisa, to take a look at every circumstance and find a different way to be curious about it. And again, what's really kind of fun about this whole inquiry, I don't know if it's this way for you, Lisa, but when I get into that kind of an investigation or inquiry or really start getting into it, and I think I have a moment, it's an aha moment, 2 seconds later, I go, no, that ain't it.
That's right.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Have you experienced that?
Oh yeah, well, definitely. I think that's the fun of it too. I mean, to try something and then say, no, that wasn't. But what else can I try? So be curious again.
Yes. Yeah. Where do you think we have the opportunity to be like full on, full tilt boogie, bull goose loony curious?
can't see a time when you know, how could you not be in almost every moment? I mean, I'm sure, you know, we all get lost in work and things like that, but curiosity can come in any moment. And it could start with I was watching or listening to Mel Robbins the other day, and she was talking about how, like you were saying, that people think that the next moment is going to be something horrible. But she says how people wake up in the morning, like going into the, you know, when they face the mirror first thing in the morning, most people, don't like, well, a good majority of people don't like what they see. A very high majority can't even look at themselves. So I mean, you know, it's creative, it's selective sight, you know. So if you could start off your day by actually looking at yourself and being curious about who that person is in the mirror and what you want that person's day to be like, you know, I think that's a good start. And then the rest will just follow with more curiosity. If you start that way, you know, the rest of your day could be immensely more entertaining.
I can see the beauty of being able to live with that moment where you kind of like startle yourself looking in the mirror going, Ken, you don't have as long hair as I do, but I mean, I actually make, what's his name in Back to the Future look like he's from GQ, you know? When I get out of bed in the morning, it's not a pretty thing and probably not good for children and other living things, if you know what I mean. But so the thing of it is do you think that curiosity can be a domain of exploration in and of itself to no end, other than just having fun in your life and playing?
It's an approach, I guess. I guess it depends on how you choose to walk the path of your life. You know, I mean, if you have someone that's, you know, let's say maybe they're, I don't know, they're an academic and they're mostly interested in observing, you know, how things evolve, and they're not really interested in doing much more. I have a friend, he's like a scribe, he documents, you know, and he doesn't really create anything. He teaches a little bit, but it's really just he's constantly curious about how things are unfolding and manifesting, and he just likes to record it all. So, and there's a lot of value in that, and often I'll access him for information that I can act on in some way, or that can help me with a project I'm doing. So he's kind of more of an observational, you know, path in his life, where I've chosen a more active kind of, you know, I'm trying to create transformation, you know, through helping other people figure out what they do best. So, you know, so I guess, you know, how your relationship to curiosity in a sense would be dictated by how you choose to walk the path of your life. But it's kind of funny. I mean, as we're talking about it, it's, you know, we talk a lot about the learning spiral. And, you know, learning spiral is, you know, you become curious, you have an experience, you have the aha moment, then you recognize the value of just being curious now at a slightly higher level, because you've had some recognition, however impactful it is, that you can now leverage into the next thing. And the other thing that just struck me, just these just a couple of random thoughts from listening to Lisa, the I think our relationship with being curious and then having a concern about what comes next has always felt proportional to how comfortable we are with practicing in advance and how skillful we believe we are at dealing with what comes up. So, you know, so whether it's going to be good or bad, a lot of people are very lack skill at handling good things in their lives. You know, it's like you hear about people who win the lottery and then like their life falls apart, you know, and they just weren't skillful at handling good fortune. You know, other people are incredibly skillful at that. Other people are incredibly skillful at handling adversity and difficulties in their life. So, but it all comes from a willingness to learn and to find joy in practicing in advance for things that may or may not happen.
Yeah, and I'm going to argue that all of that advanced preparation puts you more in the domain of certainty. that being able to have balance in our lives, we are trained in our culture that preparation, you know, uh, is it. I mean, in down times, you prepare for up times. You never know when the up times are going to come. So do the work and be prepared. I mean, that's a famous Tom Brady quote. Tom Brady, who got drafted in the 6th round, number what, 199 or whatever the heck it was. It might even have been a higher number than that, but whatever the heck it was, he got onto the Patriots because the Patriots needed a 4th backup quarterback. They got him for a song, and he was so brokenhearted, having gone through all of the training camps and all that sort of thing. He said, I am going to be prepared when the opportunity comes for me here. Drew Bledsoe gets injured. Tom steps in after a 4-game losing streak. They win the game. They win the next 9 games. Drew Bledsoe recovers. He comes back. Bill Belichick says, we're going with Tommy. Do you know how few Tom Brady's there are in the world? So the model for him is to create a very narrow focus. You probably can count on one hand, and it might be a 0, how many cigarettes he's ever smoked, however many glasses of beer, non-whole foods. He probably hasn't had a bag of potato chips since he was a small child. He made decisions about what to leave out of his life for one reason and what's one reason alone. His life showed him, as certain he was at Michigan, to go there and lead them, to the Orange Bowl, and and all of that, and to have winning seasons, that no matter how certain he was that he projected to be a great NFL quarterback, other people didn't see him that way. So now he had to do the things to prepare himself to be certain. So I told you a long story to come back around to that point again. And I wonder, in our lives, if we don't always take the high road in terms of finding our certainty, and that in many lives, what happens is it gets replaced by a substance, or it gets replaced by a bad habit, or it gets replaced by something that isn't necessarily good for us or good for those around us. And I always wonder, in those circumstances, if people replaced that, like some people would rather be certain that they're going to be miserable or take a chance that they're not. Do you know what I mean by that?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take a breath for a minute.
Just to breathe, or you want us to speak?
I want to hear what your thoughts are.
Oh, go ahead, Ken, because I'm gathering.
Well, it's kind of interesting from an athletic perspective. Tom Brady's a good example. What they couldn't quantify was, really knowing, and maybe he couldn't even really know, the level of commitment that he would place on practicing. That's what's made him great, is he figured out how to practice for him to continue to operate at a high level for a prolonged period of time, mentally, physically. And it's funny, if give me 50 guys all do the exact same diet and regimen, and you probably wouldn't have the same result. They would be in the only way you're able to do that is by staying curious, like we talked about, and then having that commitment to making choices that move you in the direction that you want to go. And I think that's an interesting thing. As a lifelong athlete, and now, I'm starting a new adventure, with a new discipline, and, it's going to be pretty intense. And it's this constant kind of dynamic of questioning, should I train hard today? What is my body telling me? Should I serve myself mentally by having pizza, and not, I have no desire at this point in my life to have the level of discipline where I'm living on food that's nutrient dense but not enjoyable. I'm gonna I'm going to enjoy my life. And if it means that I don't win a world championship, I don't really care, you know. But at the same time, you know, my goal is on the other side of this experience to have continued to live a life where my health span has been improved by the process. So that's my goal. So, you know, so if you're thinking in terms of health span and you're curious about that, it's you can't be all athlete all the time, because now you're not focusing on the other areas of your life that have value, like relationships, you know, and your mental state, you know, and how balanced you are in that. So it's just kind of interesting that, you know, I think that a lot of times where we get stuck and we forget curiosity is when we look at a Tom Brady and we think, well, if I just do like he did, I'll be like him.
Yeah.
And that is completely inaccurate. You actually, the guy who's the actor who's Thor, what's his name? Is it Chris Evans, maybe?
You
No.
lie and I'll
I
swear to it.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like really big, muscular
Oh,
guy.
yeah.
So, and yeah, and his trainer, said, because people are asking what's his secret. And his trainer said part of it is just who he is in genetics. He says, I do the same workouts and have the same nutrition plan as I train him on. We don't look the same.
Yeah.
He's got a better physique than me. He's stronger than me. He's him. So even though we're applying the same exact things, we're getting slightly different results. We're both in shape. We're both fit, blah, 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 blah. So, so I don't know, this is meandering a little bit, but I guess there's
No, we don't
there's
do
a
that around here,
caution.
Ken.
Yeah. I guess it's just the caution of when you're applying curiosity, have a little bit of an understanding of how you're looking for that to manifest in your life. I think that's where the certainty is, like the certainty of who it is you choose to be and what you value. And of course that can change, but you can get curious about things and it can take you in directions in your life that you weren't really planning to go, and then end up realizing that maybe you got to backtrack a little bit. So, but the quicker you notice that, the easier it is to course correct and continue to navigate whatever success means to you,
Lisa, you're
I'm thinking
smiling.
of certainty is after hearing Ken and everybody else, like certainty is overrated. It's like, how can you, yeah, there's not much you could be so certain in that it won't possibly ever change. Like Ken was saying, you can't, then you come up against what actually happens when you did, met obstacle A, or practice till you reach the level that you thought was going to be perfect for your next step, next part in the journey. But now you've realized, no, well, maybe I don't even want to go on this journey anymore. So there's certainty is kind of like an obscure, unattainable almost aspect of life.
Hey, what if it's a mirage? What if it's just purely an imaginary concept and construct that is designed to lead you down the path of self-destruction? I want to say that the neat part about this is I started out my training in life with two parents that were barely out of high school when they met each other and fell in love. My dad was in the Air Force. My mom was still in high school. So they got together, and then over the next 9 years, they had 6 children. There was no certainty in their life. There was no curiosity in their life. No, it was just waking up every day and going back to work, in the blood and guts physical world, and whatever that seemed to be there is the next thing. I mean, no training on how to, think things through, no training in how to communicate with each other, all the rest of that. So I want to say that for, what do we got, 7.4 billion, make a number up. I would say probably all but about maybe 500,000 people around the planet, they're all living that existence. Like my parents were raised, I was born in the 1950s. Life was good. And they still struggled. And they still didn't know. And they still were afraid. And they still had all these human emotions. it is actually this conversation that we're having right now, talking about curiosity and certainty. This right here this is the conversation of kings and queens. This is those who have the opportunity to stop and ask questions about what life is all about. This is rarefied air, in my opinion. There are so few people that get to take time out of their day or their week because they're scraping the ground or trying to carry water or feed their children.
Right.
I say it's the responsibility of us who are casting the pebbles and lighting the candles to explore the ways that we can bring this kind of, to bring the light to people who have no light in their life. And so from that standpoint, the certainty that I would like to disrupt, the certainty and the future that I would like to disrupt would have to come from the future in a curious investigation as to how do we make this work? Where do we have to go? How do we involve maybe another 200,000 or 300,000 people? And folks, I'm making these numbers up. I think there are a lot of folks. Let's say the self-help industry is probably about $4 or $5 billion a year worldwide. There are a lot of people spending money to make themselves better year after year after year for the rest of their lives, right? So how do we take that like it's a done deal and now start to model that, as the creation that we are? The question that comes to my mind is, the earliest programming that I got where I might have something to say about what happens tomorrow and the next day was setting goals. Wow, what a cool thing to do. I went to school every day up until my 10th year, or 10th grade, with no particular endpoint in mind. And I was fortunate because I had a certain amount of, native intelligence. I was a quick learner and all that. However, when somebody said, and I'm going to distill it all down to 4 steps. The first one is do all of your thinking and ask your questions. And then the next one is decide. And then the next one is act. And then the next one is review. And we would now say in our vernacular, rinse and repeat. That's that whole spiral of learning, that you do these things in this order. And there are a lot of elegant ways to express that. And there have been many, many beautiful things that have been written. And Ken, you've written some really great, great work on that whole training method, with the Tao symbol going through time and just replicating itself over and over and over again. So the point is, to kind of like step back for a moment and say, what needs to be disrupted in terms of our group think, in terms of our group operation, our behavior? What needs to be disrupted so that certainty about how life is going to be, and that there will always be people who are struggling and there'll always be people who have everything. And maybe there's another possibility.
The first thing that came to my mind was the danger of 2 words, of using always and never. I think that keeps people stuck, and I think we've seen a lot of that in conversations today, where it's always been that way, this way, so how, it can't change. It's never going to be different. I think if you just take those 2 words out of your vocabulary and try to see, well, what is possible? How could we think differently? And it's going to take that kind of imagination and curiosity to break free from things that we believe that we are stuck in, that we're certain that we're stuck in. So.
Yeah, that stuckness is it also distills down to 3 words: how it is. It's how it is.
Or that's how I am, or that's how.
Yeah. So
that's how I've always been.
Go ahead, Ken.
No, I was just thinking, Lisa, it's interesting, there's definitely absolutes cause a constriction and especially when you're feeling like you're in either or place,
Right.
instead of recognizing there's the possibility of a both and and one of the things that's helped me and people in my circle is kind of thinking that we're all on an ever-changing sliding scale, and sometimes our center of gravity, let's say, is more towards happiness, and other times it's more towards sadness. And it's just recognizing where you are and that someone else may be at a different place on that sliding scale, and tomorrow it can change. So, like I've been feeling a little sad this week, because I'm experiencing a loss right now. So, and when, sometimes for some people, they want to change that for me out of a sense of empathy. And I'll say, you know what, right now, I'm in sadness. I'm okay hanging out in sadness. I'm grieving. So it's okay, but me being able to voice that, someone else may think, who are you to tell me to stop being sad? Or who are you to think what my sadness is like, right? They could take that as like, you know, kind of personally, instead of just being able to clearly communicate where they are and the fact that they're comfortable there. And throughout the days, it's been an interesting experience. I'm in sadness more often than I normally am, but then I also have spikes to happiness, you know, and then I'll go back. So it's a scale and there's no judgment on it. And it's not either sad or happy. It's, we do this also with I and we, especially as a team. I'll ask someone when they're struggling with, like something with, fellows at work. It's like, is your center of gravity more towards an I right now, where you're really thinking about yourself, or is it more towards the we, the team? And it's okay where you are. It's just sharing that reference base with us so we know where you're coming from. And as opposed to, well, don't be selfish if you're an I, or, well, sometimes you have to look out for number one because you're in we. See what I'm saying? Meet them where they are. And I think that for a lot of us in communication, in conflict, we're not meeting someone where they are. We're either happy that they're where we are, or we're trying to move them to where we are. And that creates tension, because now you've got that either or. Either you're like me or you're not. And what are your choices? I'm happy that you're like me, or I'm going to be in disagreement with you because you're not like me. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And it's the beginning, in my opinion, of the next step, which is to invite each other to meet somewhere. The being open to accepting where you are and coming from where I am. I can now, when you get that and we've authentically shared with each other that, like, using the word okay and not okay, I'll take it into an area, where most people can identify with this immediately. It's like if I were to ask you, Ken, how long does it take to grieve? You'd have to either come up with an answer or tell me, I don't know. I'll be done when I'm done, Well, then I can ask somebody, how long does it take you to take a shower? You stop and think about it. The amount of time that it takes to take a shower has an awful lot to do with how long it takes for the water to get to the temperature that you want, how long it stays there, how much, your regimen has to do with cleaning everything on your body. Because I not only wash this beautiful head of hair, I also, apply a particular kind of a face thingy and beard thingy so that I don't dry out. And so the amount of time that it takes to take a shower, I'm done with the shower when I'm done with the shower, or the warm water runs out, whichever comes first. So the whole idea of both being in different showers, a shower of I want to help you and I want to make you feel better. Like our major concern in life is to not have other people experience pain or sorrow or grief or hunger or all of these things. And yet they do.
Can I give a slightly different perspective on that?
100%.
I think that your relationship with those things determines your level of comfort with someone else experiencing them.
I like it.
Like, you know, fasting to me has taught me the value of hunger and the signals of hunger, and how to, you know, it's given me a very deep respect for food and living in a country where I actually have access to food, and, you know, and reflecting on what I'm putting in and the value I'm receiving, all that stuff. So when someone else is hungry, I don't feel myself compelled to fix that. I'm more curious about what hunger feels like to them and their relationship to it. You know, and when someone's experiencing sadness and grief, you know, I find myself, I don't know, like, just again, it's curious. I mean, it's funny. It's that word. It's, what does that feel like to you? And,
Right.
you know, and it's so because I've developed a level of comfort with those things as just things, you know, it's like, I am not sadness. I experience sadness, but I'm not sadness. So someone else may be confused and think they're sadness, but they're not. So I don't want to feed into that. You know, I want to just recognize that they're experiencing sadness and be supportive, whatever that means. Yeah. You know, does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, and your mileage may vary.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
this is where the curiosity takes away the formula. The
Right.
formula may ask you to be in a place where you are designing your empathy around the person that you're with and what that person is communicating to and from you, as opposed to, we all know this person that comes around and goes, I understand, this must be terribly hard for you, and you know, I just want you to know that no matter what's going on in your life right now, you're going to be okay at some point in the future, and all you have to do is just start thinking about yourself and honoring those great, whatever it is, that whole conversation, which has a lot more uh, to do with making the person who is giving something feel good about the fact that they're giving something, as opposed to, do you need me to cry with you on the floor? Do you need me to hug you so long that you want to push me away? What do you need? What can I be for you right now? How can I break myself up to give you those pieces of me that you actually need right this minute? Can you even imagine what this world would look like if we all walked around doing that for each other and then walked away whole and complete with no loss, only a newly created sense of empowerment, whether it made any difference for that person or not, but to give them an opportunity to express to you in a moment and really think it over from that place of despair and that place of loss and that place of grief. You know, I don't know what I need right now. I just know it hurts. You know, and sometimes just hearing that and allowing somebody to express themselves authentically in a world where we don't get to do that all that often, to be that space for somebody, like, holy cow.
It's interesting. There's a Buddhist term for that. It's bodhicitta. And it's when you have bodhicitta, when your every moment is committed to service to sentient beings. Like, you're just serving them. Your every thought, it's like, you know, so it's like the highest level of what you're talking about, which, you know, is part of stepping onto the bodhisattva path, where you're kind of serving humanity. And the reality of it is, it doesn't happen very often.
Never
like
happens the
one
way that
person in
Steely
a
Dan said.
generation, you know. So, but I always found it an interesting concept, because it felt like, you know, I vividly remember an interview with the Dalai Lama where someone asked if he was enlightened, and he looked back and smiled and said, "Not at the moment," you know. And it's like, so, you know, so being able to, but you can touch it, you know, so that feeling that you're talking about, you know, I think it's important to give ourselves permission to not feel that we have to live there, and when the circumstances create the place where we recognize it and we do, you know? And then if it doesn't work out, that's okay too. Like, I think I put a lot of pressure on myself at one point, trying to commit my life to helping others and lost too much became kind of self-sacrificing. And that pulled me down to where I wasn't actually very helpful to others anymore. So, so I'm like giving them all the hugs till they don't need it anymore. And I'm depleting myself in the process. So there's like, this dynamic we have to be aware of. And again, I think we're back to curiosity, because you have to be curious about how all these things are coming together. And is there a feeling of balance in that moment, knowing that you could apply it all again an hour later and get a different result that's not balanced?
Yes.
I think that's why it's so hard. This is a
I-
complicated thing,
I really love what you're saying, and what keeps coming to my mind. Do you want the blue pill or the red pill?
Yeah.
The blue pill. The blue pill is the one that you take that is a placebo for you. Go back to where you think everything is all right. You're full of crap, but you think everything is all right, right?
Yeah.
The red pill is bring it. I have no idea. Let's see how far I fall, and let's see if I'm still okay after we hit the bottom, or we hit wherever we hit, or we don't hit anything,
So are we basically saying that one of the pills is curiosity and the other is certainty?
I just really distilled it down to that, didn't I?
Come on.
The red pill or the blue pill, Neo, which is it going to be?
Yeah.
The remarkable thing here is, and I'm really hoping that you can experience this at home, or you have, is that by touching each other, intimately in conversation, we are acting. We are creating a response in each other and you, the listener, and you're creating that response in us. And that's why we're here. So I think the other neat thing, that I mentioned earlier is that formula, the 4-step, where you do your thinking, then you make your decision, and then you do the action, and then you review where what did you learn from that circumstance. That invites failure. That invites really completely crashing the certainty model and bringing up the hypothesis model. I wonder if I do this, this, and this, it'll turn out that way. And our culture, in my opinion, conditions us too much to expect a result. A particular this is what's going to happen. If you put A and B together, you're going to get C. And if you don't get C, you wasted your time doing the A and B, putting them together, as opposed to the scientist who basically says, I'm going to put A and B together and see what happens with C, D, F, G, H, I, J, K. Let's see what comes out the other end. And now let's change the amount of A and the amount of B, and let's see what that does. And now let's change the amount. Let's leave the B out. Let's just do A, And so that's the curiosity, that if we trained our culture to behave in that fashion in an appropriate adult way, what kind of problems do you think we could not resolve together?
So I read I don't remember what book it was, but they were talking about that there are two types of thinkers.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure it was experimental thinkers and conceptual thinkers.
Yep.
And a conceptual thinker is someone who likes to play with the ideas first and kind of follow all of before they do something. Where an experimental thinker wants to just do something and then assess the result, whether it was a success or failure. So it's like a more active approach. And it was really an interesting thing, because I started noticing it teaching kids, especially, where some of them would get this itch. They just wanted to try it, and if I tried to tell them, well, let me finish explaining, I'd lose them, so I'm like, go ahead, try it. And then they'd mess it up, and it's like, how'd that work out? Not good. Why? They were curious. Others, if I tried to just get them going and they didn't fully understand it, it would create anxiety for them. So it was interesting. And and I'd have the conversation with them. Oh, you're this kind of thinker, is your first instinct. Then that took the pressure off of them, that recognition of that. So, and I wonder, Bill, if that's part of, again, thinking in terms of disconnects. If you're an experimental thinker and your assumption is that everyone else processes the way you do, you're going to have like, you're going to be 50-50 right. I don't know what the percentages are. And I'm sure there's more to this, but, but if you run into someone who wants to explore it more on a mental plane first, and you're like kinesthetic and let's do it, there's going to be a disconnect there that could easily be resolved if you just had the conversation, you
Yeah.
know? So, but you got to know, you have to be curious about how they process. That was another one. The multiple intelligence stuff was fascinating to us as I learned about that. Some kids, to learn a kata, a martial arts form, if they were math logic and we gave them a series of numbers, they'd rock it. Others were spatial, so we'd show them a map and they do amazing. Others were verbal, we describe it, and they, so each one would learn the same thing, but through a lens that worked for them. So we had to be very curious about how we could position them, to best succeed in their learning style. And they could use other ones, but it was always interesting to see what worked best. Some of them put music on, and all of a sudden they got better.
Yeah.
It was just really fascinating. So, but it couldn't be about, I'm the teacher, you need the discipline, to learn, because if you were more like me, you'd be okay. It was, no, they're not like me. And how can I be skillful in helping them tap into their own unique potential through their own unique style of learning,
Yeah. Yeah, I'll tell you what, I mean, kind of feeding off of that energy, number one, let me just acknowledge that is the epitome of meeting people where they are. The whole idea of redesigning the message so that it is actually listenable and understandable by the receiver. And it just kind of leads me to a thought. I had a beautiful breakfast this morning with a lovely young lady who's in college. And the neat part of it is we talked a little bit about her experience in education. And she's got this terrific, well-rounded experience of having gone to 3 grammar schools in this general vicinity. One was North Windham, and the other one was someplace else, and then in Coventry. And what she had to say was the North Windham experience was quite different for 2 reasons. The population mix in terms of ethnicity and number of people speaking Spanish was much greater there. Also, the resources, they didn't know it while they were going to school, but the resources were older. The resources were not up to date. They didn't have all of the things, and you have to go and experience it someplace else. So she said, when she got to Coventry, which was, I think, 5th and 6th grade, she'd had these other 2 experiences in the other 2 schools, and when she got there, it was kind of remarkable to her. And I asked her, I said, well, how was it being a Spanish-speaking person going to Coventry? She said, I don't think there were more than 3 or 4 other students, in the whole school, that have my background. And I said, well, what was that like for you? She said, well, I was popular. I said, really? She said, yeah, I spoke Spanish. And so all the kids wanted to be my partner in Spanish class, right? So, and then I asked her, I said, so what else was different? And she said, new. Everything was new,
Yeah.
the school, the books, the teachers, they were all teaching from a different place. There was a lot less focus on teaching cultural diversity than there had been in North Windham School. And she didn't say that like, there was a value judgment there. She said just the content of the day. And as they talked about it, and I said, well, what else did you notice? And she said, there were a lot more kids, at that school, the first one, when I was in kindergarten through 2nd grade, that didn't have anything. I mean, their families, they had a lot of family issues. They had a lot of poverty and all the rest of that. And I said, well, what about Coventry? And she said, well, not so much. And I said, well, did you have any judgments? And she said something like, I want more kids to experience what it's like, in the Coventry school system. I let that sink in for a minute. And the really important part and the takeaway for me was when we are training and teaching our children, what are we training and teaching them? Are we coming from the certainty that their future is going to look a particular way and we have to prepare them that way? Or are we coming from curiosity and let's find out what works for them and where they want to go if we expose them to a lot of different opportunities? That's two things. It could be thousands of others. But if every single premise, every single question started out with the words, what if? You know?
With curiosity.
Yeah. And so certainty, I'm going to say this because certainty is going to get a bad rap by my saying so. But what if certainty is the language of resignation? Here's how it is. I know what the future looks like. It either looks good or it looks bad, but it looks this shape of good. It doesn't look like wide open good. It doesn't look like I can do anything, and the world is my oyster. And what if curiosity is the? I mean, these are two. Let's say they're both modes of operation, where certainty is the mode of resignation and curiosity is the mode of possibility, where curiosity has everything to do with, I don't know. And certainty is, I'm pretty sure. And what does life look like if we can train ourselves to notice when we're operating in one mode or the other, and then have a gear that we can shift so we can choose where we want to operate?
I think that if you just stop and say, anytime you think you're certain about something, you're like, are you certain about this? And then, well, not really. So what's the other, what are the possibilities outside of that? I mean, it would be hard to do every single moment, but it's kind of, it could be that important in people's lives to just say, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I'm certain of that. No, wait, let me take a look at that for a minute. Yes. And get curious about what else what are the possibilities? Even if it's just one other possibility, it's not a certainty then.
Yeah, I think that it feels important to remember, like quite a few years ago, I had a conversation with someone who could not understand my choice to be an entrepreneur because of the lack of certainty. And, and he had a job with, benefits and 401k and all the things. And he's like, I just don't understand how you can do that. 2 years later, he got laid off and it was gone. And, and I remember it was really interesting because, we were talking, about what that experience was like. And it didn't take him long to find another job very similar to what his other job was, that again gave him a feeling of certainty. So, and I think that there are a lot of people, I saw this with parents as their approach to whether they wanted their kids to be curious. Some people would much rather do everything they can to maintain a feeling of certainty, even if it's an illusion, rather than embrace uncertainty, that requires curiosity. So, they want to map out their child's life in a way that they believe will allow their child to be successful. And they're very uncomfortable with their child exploring, being curious about things that don't match that paradigm that they have.
Yeah.
So we have to recognize, I think it's important to recognize that some people, they're not interested in this conversation. They're not interested in being curious, and they can live a very fulfilling life with that illusion of certainty that may never be broken. They may live their whole life having things go pretty much as planned, and there'll be the ups and downs, but overall it will work for them. So that's okay. So, so it's just kind of an interesting thing, I guess.
There's kind of an interesting truism that I run into very frequently when I'm talking to people who are up to something and are looking to, as I like to say, set the world on fire in a good way. And it's like this whole notion that kids grow up and their life is going to pretty much operate within one standard deviation, statistically, of their parents and what their parents were able to produce in the world. And so there are people that break that curve and they really do great things, in terms of like Elon Musk. Who knows where he started, but I don't care where he started. Even if he came from a rich family, there was no way to project that he'd be the richest man on the planet at any point in the future. And he may hold on to that for a minute or two. And a lot of that's going to have to do with how his business is valued by the rest of the people who put money in it and take it out. But the really key thing for me in that whole equation, in terms of thinking of my own personal experience, the certainty that I traded away in working for other people by the time I was 35 years old was, I am totally open to being uncertain about what happens next, and I'm willing to lose it all. And at that point, what I thought was a lot was minuscule compared to what the next 30 years have generated for me in all areas, especially being able to sit and say some things that I'm not right all the time, not even probably a tenth of the time, but I speak to get other people that are smarter than me to sit up, take notice, and start talking to. And that's what my little bit of experience on this planet empowers me to do with folks. And that is to ask questions that other people's thinking will generate solutions. If I'm involved in that, that's cool too. I'm not going to like start a fire and walk away if you need me. However, I walk into a room really hoping with all my heart I'm not the smartest guy there. And if I am, I go find another place to play in a hurry. And that's my formula for creating uncertainty in terms of, who cares? Really? At the end of the day, they're going to throw dirt in our face. So why don't we just go have a little bit of fun with each other between now and then?
Definitely.
Yeah. So all of that said, Ken, any parting thoughts for us? And I think we've done a pretty good job of beating up, curiosity and certainty today. And the neat part of this is, Lisa, no matter how many times we talk about a word, have you noticed it's never the same conversation?
No, it never will be.
Never will.
I was just trying to think if we had before.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say one more thing, and then I'll intend for this to be the last thing I say, but who knows? Gino Oriama, one of my favorite quotes of his is, you can never stick your foot into the same river twice.
Mm-hmm.
I say that conversation is like that too. And then one other guy that I have a lot of respect for, I was a devout scientific thought, science fiction reader, Arthur C. Clarke. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Yep.
I'd say bring on the magic.
And magic is curiosity.
Say again?
Magic is curiosity.
Holy mackerel. A guy named Disney made something happen with that, didn't he?
A little bit.
Ken?
I'm good. I think it was a great conversation.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the rest of us that are out there in the world today, go forth, have the best day ever. And as a dear friend of Ken and mine used to say, do the best that you can, just for today. Just for now, do the best that you can. And with that closing, I want to wish you all a very wonderful rest of the day, a rest of the week, and we will see you again a week from now. Namaste, y'all.
Namaste.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us each week, as well as the rest of the network, at exvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.